people that don't know me, I am Bas de Veer. I am the local REDCap administrator, meaning that I govern REDCap, I do trainings, I do consultations, etc. I basically work with REDCap all day long. So feel free to ask me any questions whatsoever and I'll try to answer them. So what are we going to do today? My main goal today is to get you guys an overview of what REDCap is, how you can use it, and what the best use of it is. I also would like to get you guys started with building your first initial small little project or bigger project if that's your thing. I'm going to do that by first introducing REDCap, very briefly an introduction, then go over some practical issues I have to say because of ITHS policies. Finally getting access to the REDCap. Finally, and this the meat of it, is the basic project workflow. I'm going to go step by step. This is how you start up a project, this is how you define your settings, this is how you make your forms for the first time, etc. And finally, if you have any specific questions because you have, for instance, a project in Nicaragua or something, or Bangladesh, which are usually a little bit more involved than the standard survey to all your coworkers, interactive Q&A is a perfect time to have me demonstrate that. So what's REDCap? Well, REDCap stands for Research Electronic Data Capture. It's a web-based system, meaning you can access it from anywhere in the world where you have internet access. It's cross-platform, which is IT speak for you can run on your Mac, on your iPhone, on your Android, on your Windows machine, on your Linux machine, whatever has a browser. It's highly secure. More about that later. It was built for research, people in the biomedical field, by researchers in the biomedical field. So that's a very big plus from my point of view. And it's highly customizable, which is usually not the case with, for instance, an Access database. So some background statistics. REDCap was first created by Vanderbilt University in Tennessee in 2004. Was by far not the application that is today because they add features like crazy, like once every 2 weeks or so they come out with a new bug fix or a new feature, and usually they're little small ones, but sometimes they get a little bit bigger, which are interesting. At this point in time we have, or as of yesterday, because every day people add new users to it, we have close to 800 institutions worldwide in over 60 countries, which for an exclusively English program is quite the achievement from my point of view. All these institutions in all these countries have about 83,000 projects, over 110,000 end users, and we are a fairly big chunk of that. We're not the biggest, but we're getting there. We've been running REDCap since 2009. We have over 900 projects. We have 160 IRB approved projects, meaning that there's 160 different PIs out there that use REDCap for some kind of human subject study. And we have over 1,000 active users at this point in time. So plenty of people who use REDCap in this neighborhood. Why use REDCap? Well, REDCap was built for the collection of data. So if you want to use REDCap to evaluate your data, please don't use it. It's better to just go with an SPSS or an R or Excel if you're really low tech. So it excels in the collection of data. One of the strong points is its accessibility. Like I said, web-based, globally, you can access it from anywhere. We do actually have people from Nicaragua logging in daily and from Bangladesh. Very secure, also mentioned that. The ease of use, I like to submit all the programs I work with to the mother-in-law test. My mother-in-law can use REDCap with very minimal instruction, and this is a person who has trouble putting photos on Facebook. So, just in comparison. You have a high degree of control over your data, over your projects, which ensures also quality to a certain extent. So if everything goes according to plan, you should have very minimal involvement of me or any of my colleagues. You are in control of your own data. The flexibility and the autonomy go kind of hand in hand. You have the autonomy to customize your project as much as you want, hence the flexibility. Also a big plus point of REDCap in Seattle is that we have a very wide user base. Like I said, 1,000 active users, of which I think roughly 600 or 700 log in once a week. So you have 700 colleagues around the research community in Seattle, which isn't all of Seattle, but it's a fairly large population, who use REDCap in one shape, way, or form. So that means a lot of institutional knowledge and a lot of know-how floating around here. We also, well, I'm doing the support by training and by answering emails, and we have a bunch of training materials that are online which you can use. Then the REDCap and security thing, I hinted at it before. Basically how we set up our security, and I had a separate slide for this because I get a lot of questions about this because of IRB restrictions. How we set it up is we manage it, UW manages it. It actually is hosted in the UW tower, the big data center, which you have to go through like 3 levels of security to get to, which kind of looks like a nuclear bunker. So really hard to get to the physical computer itself. It's encrypted to get over it through the internet. If you don't know what 128-bit encryption is, it's the same encryption Google uses for Gmail, for instance. That's a good analogy. It's fully HIPAA compliant, which is always good to know. And we have our access to your data in a 3-tiered system. First, you need to have a login, a UW NetID, something like that. That gets you into REDCap and gets you into like a nice little scheme. This is REDCap, here's the training videos, etc. But then you don't have any access to any projects yet. That's the second layer, project access. You need to be added to somebody else's project as a user, or you have to create your own. And the third one is that once you get added to a project, that person that adds you gets to restrict or open up the project to you by very granular user controls. They can set which forms you can see, which forms you can edit, if you can export any data, or if you can only export, for instance, de-identified data, and a whole slew of other options. Everything you do in REDCap is logged. So if you change a single little variable in record 5000, REDCap logs that for that particular thing. It's really useful if somebody wants to audit your project, like what happened with your data. I actually had a lady the other day contacted me like in a panic, saying like, okay, they entered some data in Nigeria, and when I exported it, it wasn't there. And then we went back to the logging file, and it turned out that they hadn't entered the data yet, even though they said to her like, yeah, we did that. So it's a really powerful feature to also keep your data entry people honest. We also have the option to de-identify data, like I said before. Basically, any variable you put in REDCap can be identified as personal health information, no matter how small or big. It's just a little toggle you can do. In the export module, you can then select the de-identifying option, saying, okay, give me only the variables that are not identifiable or which are identifiable. Then the practical matters, the costs, which is very important. We are funded by the National Institutes of Health until 2017 to provide REDCap to the Seattle community and the Wyoming region at no charge. So you can put as many projects, users in it as you want. Up to you. This guarantees a little basic level of support, meaning these intro classes, some of the advanced classes I give, for instance, the next one's next week. The supplemental documentation I'm putting online, and up to 1 to 2 hours of consultation for new projects. So let's say you have a fairly complex project and you say, well, I might not be able to handle this myself, or I want a little bit of advice. You can email me or call me and say, like, can you come over and talk about a project for an hour, and we won't charge you for that. The flip side for us is that usually these things turn into paid consultations because it's a complex project and they want our help. We can do it a little bit quicker than most people because we do it every day. So that's that. What we do charge for is like the project development, like I just said. We have the ability to get data from Epic and Orca in the different hospitals and put them in a REDCap project. However, that's a little bit involved because we have to dive into a data warehouse, extract the data you want, and then put it in a project, which isn't an automatic process, unfortunately. So we do charge for that. If you deleted data after blowing past the 5 safeguards we have in place for that, then it's your fault because you blew past all those 5 safeguards, and if I want to recover that data, I have to spend about half a day sifting through backups, so we charge for that. However, I've worked here a year and nobody ever asked me to do that because of the 5 safeguards. And if you spam me every day with a high rate of post-production changes, saying like, I want to change this field, and then you wait for me to accept it, and then you change, I want to change another field. You can bundle these in one big request, which I prefer because then I only have to review things once and not every 5 minutes. For all intents and purposes, if we charge you, it's about $96 an hour. So, then are your responsibilities. Review this at your leisure because yeah, it's a lot of legal speak. Basically, you are the master of your own project, is what this says. So you have to set it up, you have to manage it, so to speak, in terms of users, in terms of regulatory approval, any copyright fees you might have to pay, etc. What our responsibility is to host REDCap, to back it up every day at 1 at night, to train some end users, to enable some advanced features which we don't release to the general public due to privacy issues, yeah, and to approve new project creation and post-production changes. Also, if you for some reason can't access REDCap and your computer is still working, we provide a limited tech support saying, okay, have you tried this, have you tried that? Just shoot me an email, I'll usually be able to pinpoint it quite quickly. Log into REDCap. Well, first you can go to this link, redcap.iths.org. You can select one of the following credentials. Most people will use a UW-Net ID. The Protect Network one was phased out yesterday actually, which was a way to have outside people access to your project. However, we switched that to UW-Net IDs. So there's a survey down here that if you have somebody, for instance in Nigeria, who doesn't have a UW-Net ID, they can go here, they have to put in their name, a valid email address, and which institution they're affiliated with, and probably your name, so I can check with you if it's kosher. If they do that, I usually turn it around within a day or so to have them have an access, an ID that's workable, so to speak. More information about user management type questions can be found in the FAQ over here. There's also a link in REDCap to this thing. Once you log in, you see this very blurry screenshot, which I need to replace, where you have a couple of tabs. You have your home button, which has a little bit of general information about REDCap, like built by Vanderbilt, etc. But you usually want to end up in the My Projects tab, which is a list of all the projects you're currently in. I, for instance, have about 35 of them at this point in time. Most people have 3 or 4. However, this gives you a quick select, okay, I want to go to this project and work on this project, which is really easy. Then we have the Request a New Project tab, where you can create a new or request a new project, basically by title, what kind of project, what's the purpose of it. We'll go over that in a little bit. Then we have the training resources, which are videos about REDCap. There's one video that covers roughly the material we do in this class, so if you have somebody who didn't get to attend this class because of scheduling conflicts, you can direct them to that training video. Oh, my bad. However, that's always lagging a couple of versions behind, so my class is up to date on the current version we're running. Then we have the help and FAQ, which is a very, very long page with a bunch of questions people asked about REDCap, and we try to answer. We have our little Send It tab, which is a way for you to send files securely through the internet. Email does the same thing. However, it's comparable to a Dropbox or a WeTransfer function, so not a lot of people use it because of that. If you want to change anything about your profile, up here is My Profile, and of course the logout, where you can change, for instance, your name or add an extra email address. REDCap has an automatic timeout of 30 minutes, meaning that if you've gone away for lunch or you got to get coffee, you got held up after 30 minutes, REDCap will kick you out of the system. Security feature, to keep away prying eyes. So if you want to request a project, the first thing you do is add a title, which can be anything, which you can think of, your very long study name, or just like, I want to practice for me, up to you. Then you have to select a purpose. We use this to track how REDCap is used, obviously. The first one is practice just for fun, which most people will use to begin with and to mess around with REDCap. The second one and the fourth one is operational support and quality improvement, which you can use, for instance, to run your study or ask what people are bringing for the potluck on Friday in a survey form. Up to you. And the main one a lot of people use is the research purpose, which is a little bit more involved because we're also asking for PI name, IRB number if you have it, and a little bit more of a specification on specific purpose. Other is for all other things if that doesn't fit in one of these four categories. For instance, training. After putting in the purpose, you have to put in a type. We basically have two types. We have a blank slate, meaning a totally empty REDCap project with nothing enabled. Your sandbox, you can play with it as much as you want and customize it much you want. However, most people that are starting out with REDCap are a bit overwhelmed because I don't know where to go and I didn't take the intro course. For those people, we also have project templates, which is a list. It's not the entire list, but you can scroll down on it, of about 10 templates, ranging from a very simple survey to 2-arm longitudinal 9-form collecting drug A and B clinical trial study type thing, and anything in between, basically. You can select this template, and once it's approved, you can mess around with it as much as you want. You can change the variables, you can change the settings at all, but at least you'll have some sort of example of how to set stuff like this out. Play around with it, I would assume. If you're not sure which one to use, create an extra project to test these things out. So I'd like to demonstrate now how to log into REDCap and request a project. So first you go to redcap.iths.org and you'll see this screen. If you, like me, logged in with a UW.NET ID, you'll see these links. If you log in with a different ID, you'll see that ID show up. However, for most people, they'll just go to the select your affiliation drop-down menu, select your University of Washington thing. You can select if you want to have your browser remember these settings for a week or for this session, which is really useful if you don't want to type your password every single time. So I won't do that. So everybody familiar with this screen? Good. I don't have to explain that. We'll then take you to the home button. Like I said, home, my project with the list, requesting a new project, training resources, help and FAQ, send it, and you guys won't have to, because that's an admin function. So in my projects, you'll see a huge list of all my projects at this point in time. But for you guys, this will be interesting, creating a new project. For instance, let's call it Training, October 1st. If I select the purpose, for instance, practice, it says fine, you're here to practice. However, if I want to do research, it gets a little bit more involved. All these things are optional. So if you don't know it at this point in time, you can fill it out later. However, we do ask you to fill out at least the PI name and the email of the PI. And if you have it, some people don't have it yet, the IRB number. I do a frequent query of all the projects in REDCap to see who filled this out and who didn't. It's one of the metrics we use to convey value to the NIH and to my bosses, saying, okay, we have 200 people using it with approved projects, which is kind of a big thing for them. So if you have it, please fill it out, and if you don't, you can expect an email from me once every 3 months saying, please fill it out. So for this thing, just do other, in this case training. I can choose an empty project, blank slate like I said here, or a template. Let's do a template for now. Anybody has a preference for a template I should use? Single survey. For you guys this will be request a project, but since I'm an admin I can actually create them. Click on this. For you guys, you will get a notice saying, okay, we have this, send this to the administrator for approval. However, once you click on it, you actually end up in this little page. But we're not there yet. So the approval process. Why do we do this? Because some people see it as a hassle. Well, the first reason is security. We like to see who's entering stuff in REDCap and if it's kosher. It's the internet, the big bad internet. We have hackers, we have botnets, we have people from the Czech Republic trying to get our credit card information for some reason. So we like to keep REDCap secure. Also because we're using a lot of PHI and we have sensitive information in here. We take our security very, very seriously. It also basically guarantees smooth operations. If I get a handle on how many people add projects to REDCap, I can allocate more resources to the backend in terms of servers, so that you get a snappy REDCap and don't have to wait half an hour for a page refresh, for instance. The other one is the double check, which is kind of tied in with the security and with the data loss prevention. Data loss prevention is mostly concerned with the approval process for post-production changes, but I mentioned here because it's part of an approval process. And as I said, done by me or another REDCap administrator within 1 business day. So even if I'm on holiday, you don't have to wait for 2 weeks. One of my colleagues will take over this little approval process segment. Then your project setup. When you start in REDCap, these things are your main concern to begin with, because without a project setup, you can't do anything with your project because it's an empty project at that point in time. It's a step-by-step process. We have our main project settings, our instrument design. Main project settings is the same thing as what you did when you created a project. You can edit your title in there and some of the purposes. Then instrument design is the spot where you will spend most of your days, since this is where you create your CRFs, your case report forms, your surveys, whatever you want to call it. If you have a longitudinal study and you activated that function, event design will also show up. This is conditional on having a longitudinal study. So if you start your own project and you don't see this, don't freak out. It's actually hidden because you haven't activated longitudinal mode yet. Then we have 3 optional modules, although I don't think the user rights is optional, but that's my opinion. These modules allow you to customize the REDCap project a little bit more. For instance, you can add a secondary ID or designate an email field to email invites to. For bookmarks, if your data entry process is dependent on a specific site where you have a formula or a calculator or a protocol site for some reason, you can put it in the bookmarks here, so it's actually hard-coded in REDCap at that point in time for that project, so it doesn't matter where your data entry persons are, they also always have access to their bookmarks. Then the user rights, like I said, very granular control over who sees what in your project and who can do what in your project. Highly recommend you at least check it out once if you have more than 1 user in your project, so you can mess around with it. And finally, the move to production. A REDCap project has basically 2 stages or modes or whatever you want to call it. A development mode, which is where each project starts out in, and a production mode. What you can do in production and development is exactly the same. You have the same functionality, you can send surveys, you can add people, you can modify stuff as much as you want. The big difference between production and development is that if you want to change anything in your case report form, for whatever reason, protocol update, PI decided that age should be above gender, whatever, you will have to go through the approval process. The main reason for this is that REDCap assumes that if you're in production, you're actually collecting data, real life data in the real world, with real patient data, real PHI. If you inadvertently delete a variable or delete an option or do anything that might cause data loss, it would be a waste if you do that inadvertently. So that's what this safeguard is for. So in production, you will have to go into a draft mode, do your changes, and then enter them for approval. I get them a nice little overview of everything you want to do and big red flags if something causes data loss. Like I said, I usually do that within 1 day, but usually quicker because for me it's a little click through. If I see something that I don't like, which I think might cause data loss, deleting a variable or deleting options will do that. I will send you an email saying, like, are you really sure you want to do this because this will kill some of your data? If you then say yes, sure, go ahead, I'll put it through regardless, but at least you'll have that double check so you don't inadvertently delete some of your study data. So I'll just go into REDCap again. I have my list here. This list, by the way, is ordered in the date of creation. So my first project I made is on top, and the latest, which was the training one, is on the bottom. The little columns over here, this signifies how many people you have in your study, the amount of records, the amount of fields, individual variables, different instruments, a form versus a survey, the type. If it's a single one, it's a classical database. If it's 3 little forms, it's a longitudinal one, so you can quickly see which one was which. And finally the status. Paper with a pencil is development, green check mark is production. As you can see, it can differ wildly, the amount of fields and the amount of records. I have, for instance, this one I have 650 records, but I have a lot of fields. And this one is the exact opposite of that. Sky's the limit, you can do either, or anything in between. So let's go to my demo project, which I'll go through in this way. Let me quickly go through the main navigation of REDCap so you guys can get it around. On the top left-hand side, you will have the main navigation. Here you can go back to that My Projects list I just showed you. The project home and the project setup are dependent on the project you're in, so it will go to this tab and this tab respectively. It also shows you what your project status is, development or production. Underneath there you have your data collection options, so to speak. These change based on the functions you activate. So if you activate surveys, it will actually give you a link saying manage your survey participants. If you want to do some scheduling, it adds scheduling. If those things are not enabled, they won't appear here. So don't be weirded out if you don't see them in your own project to begin with. What's always there is the record status dashboard and the add edit records. The record status dashboard will give you a quick overview of all your records, more about that later, and the add edit records will allow you to do some data entry. Underneath there, I think I need to scroll down for that. Yeah, there we go. We have our applications. These are all the applications available in REDCap. I see them all because I'm an administrator, but you can actually turn these off and on. So for instance, if you don't use locking features in e-signature, don't give yourself the rights and you'll won't see that. So reduce a little bit of clutter. Really quickly what they all do. Calendar will give you an overview of all the patients you're scheduled. Data export tool will allow you to export your data. Import tool do the opposite. The data comparison tool will let you compare two records to each other, which is really useful if you do double data entry. Logging is your portal to that audit trail I talked about earlier. File repository is basically a list of all the exports you run so far. So if somebody ran an export 3 months ago, you can look it up here. User rights and DAGs, or data access groups, governs your user rights. More about data access groups later. Record locking, locks your records. E-signature is actually doesn't really work that well because we use Shibboleth. So please forget about that one. Randomization, if you're you need randomization. Graphical data views is a way to quickly get some very, very basic graphs of your data. For instance, if you have a bunch of drop-down menus or checkboxes or something, this will give you an overview, a little bar chart saying, okay, you have 5 people that answered A and 6 that did B, that kind of stuff. Really useful if you have to do, if you're in a pinch and you have to do a quick graphical view to your boss or something. The data quality module will actually allow you to query your data about specific data quality rules. So for instance, if you want to check if there are any pregnant males, you would do it here because you can write a little query for that saying give me all the records where male is true and pregnant is true, which shouldn't happen. API is for when you want to hook up an external program to REDCap and want to do that in a programmatic way. That stands for Application Programming Interface. Report Builder will allow you to do very basic reports, as in give me all the records with who are male and under 35, and we'll give you a list of all those records with the variables you choose. Then we have 4 bookmarks that I put in there. The user mailing list is actually the community at large. If you have a question regarding REDCap, like how do I enter this variable, for instance, you can ask that to the ITHS user mailing list. Usually within a day or 2 people will answer your question if it's not over their heads. If it is over their heads, I'll monitor this list too. I'll step in and help you. Supplemental documentation has some IRB related stuff like security, PDFs, that kind of stuff. And also all the slides from the classes. The ITHS REDCap classes takes you to the class schedule, which you guys, all of you probably found by now, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. And the user management FAQ is how to add external users. Below that we have the main REDCap help and information, another link to the video tutorials and to the help and FAQ page. There's also a suggest a new feature, which actually sends an email directly to the people at Vanderbilt saying, I would like to see videos incorporated in it for some reason. They'll read that and take it under advisement. So, in the right hand side of the screen is where the magic happens, so to speak. You have your name of your project home, which is actually a quick overview of stuff you can do, some quick tasks, who are actually current users, your project statistics, and upcoming events if you have events. Your project setup is where you'll spend most of your days setting up your project. Other functionality has some more esoteric functions like copy your project, delete your project, and archiving. And the revision history is actually a good example of the logging feature inherent in REDCap, which is another way you can see who messed with your project, which time. That's how we do it. Okay, any questions so far? Everybody overwhelmed yet? No? Good. Your main project settings. Like I just said, you can do your name and your purpose in there. If you didn't fill out your IRB, please fill it out here. It's really easy. The other main thing in main project settings is here is where you activate your longitudinal mode or your surveys. If you have a blank slate, this is turned off by default. So the reason for this is that if you don't use these things, they will actually clutter up REDCap a little bit with different features here and there. So if you don't need it, why would it show it to you? So that's why they turn it off. So if for some reason I don't see the survey options somewhere in my online designer, that's probably because survey is off. So please double check that to begin with. Longitudinal studies themselves. In REDCap, a longitudinal study is defined by arms, meaning you can have a placebo group and a drug A group, or a group A, group B, 1, 2, whatever you want to call it. In each arm you have a bunch of events, and each event can have a bunch of forms, whatever you want to select on this. The main advantage of a longitudinal study over a classical study is a classical study will just give you a list of all your case report forms, which you can fill out exactly once for each participant. In a longitudinal study, you can reuse existing forms. So let's say you have a follow-up form, and that's the same for 1 month, 3 months, 8 months, 12 months, 2 years from now. Instead of recreating that form for each and every visit, you can just make it a longitudinal study and reuse it. It's really easy to tag. This also has the advantage that you don't have to come up with creative new variable names. It's ideal for clinical trials and for keeping some sort of an overview in bigger studies. And like I said, it creates, or I didn't say it actually, it creates a smaller list of forms. So instead of having 10 forms you have to fill out through your entire project lifecycle, you only, for the follow-up event, have your follow-up visit report and lab values. And then once they fill that out, they can close REDCap and go to the next patient. Something like that. If you want to know more about this, come to the longitudinal studies class next week. Surveys. Again, you enable this in the main project settings. You can set up every form as a separate survey. So for instance, I have 6 forms here. I can set up every single one of them as a survey. I can set up 2 as a survey, it doesn't matter which one. For each survey, you have a bunch of settings found in the survey settings. Notifications saying, let's say you have somebody monitoring who's entering data or who's doing your participants. You can set up an email notification saying, hey, somebody filled out your survey, you might want to check it out. And it just email it to them, and it prevents people from having to log in every 5 minutes to check if there's been new participants. Really useful. I use it for the registration all the time, so I got an email every time one of you signed up. Automated invitations is a way to automate your workflow. Let's say you have a study that relies heavily on participant data entry. You can have an intake form and say, okay, after the intake form is ready and they meet a certain amount of criteria, I would like them to fill out Form 2 after 3 weeks. And after Form 2 is completed, Form 4 after 5 weeks. You can set that up to be totally automated. So you don't have to hire somebody who basically babysits the form collection or the participant survey distribution. You can automate that to a certain extent. However, automated invites do hinge on people having access to the internet and a working email address. So if you have a somewhat older population who are not as proficient with the internet as you would like, this might not be the best option. So this is my main project settings. I'm in project setup, and I can see very quickly that I have my longitudinal data collection enabled and my surveys enabled. If I, for instance, disable longitudinal data collection, I hit disable, gives you a pop-up, are you sure? And you'll see actually that my scheduling feature here disappears. If I enable it, it's red is disabled. My scheduling feature reappears. So that's a way of REDCap to streamline your workflow. It only shows you what you need. And the same thing works for surveys too. Again, if you click on this, you can modify your project settings. If you want to go to that specific survey setting, go to your online designer where you have that list and you'll see these options. If a survey is, or if a form is enabled as a survey, it'll have this little green check mark in the shield icon. If it's not enabled, for instance like completion data, it will have a big button called enable, so you can actually enable it. Each survey has its settings, notifications, automated invitations. So you can set this up for each and every survey individually. Survey settings look, I won't go over it in detail because it's quite extensive. It looks like this, for instance. I do want to mention that it says delete survey at the bottom here, which is kind of misleading because you actually don't delete the form, you just disable it as a survey. So it basically reverts it back to a form status. However, since it's delete survey, people are kind of freaking out, like, am I losing data about it? but you don't. So going back to this, notifications looks really easy. Just gives you a list of all your users with their email addresses, and automated invitations looks like this. So plenty of options to customize. Form design. You basically have 3 different ways of getting forms into REDCap. The first one is the online designer, which is a very point and click wizard type way of creating a form or a survey. I would say it's best suited for under 30 variables because studies that have more than 30 variables usually have a lot of repetition in them. And for that, you can better use the data dictionary. The data dictionary is an Excel spreadsheet where you can quickly copy-paste large chunks of variables and create larger forms quite quickly. In the online designer, you'll have to, for each and every variable, go to the wizard, click on all the appropriate options, and then hit save. In the data dictionary, I can, for instance, copy one variable 10 times with just a drag and drop. The danger of the data dictionary is that you can screw up your project quite quickly because you have that power to quickly create new variables and delete variables. So be aware of that. I actually teach a completely separate class in the data dictionary because it's not hard, it just has the potential to screw up your project in a very nasty way. So I like to teach people properly how to use this. If you use it, it kind of saves you 75% of your data entry time in terms of creating. The third option is the REDCap library. This is a central library for all the REDCap instances in the entire world. So people who have, for instance, a FACT-G questionnaire have put it on there, so you can just look it up, type in the name, and it says, okay, I have these 5 forms that actually match your criteria. And you can hit import, and it will actually import it into your project directly without any intervention whatsoever. Really useful if you have a validated tool in your REDCap library. One little caveat for the REDCap library is your PI, or if you're the PI, you are responsible for terms of service, meaning that if it's a questionnaire or a form or a validated tool that has some copyright or some use restrictions on it, it's up to you to actually make it right or make it happen that you get approval to do this. If they see that you used it and they come to me, bosses, why have you allowed this? Well, it's not my thing, it's your responsibility to pay the fees or get a copyright agreement with them. Today we're going to focus primarily on the online designer. This is really easy, people can figure it out themselves. The data dictionary requires a separate class, like I said. The online designer is accessible through instrument design. There's a big button called Online Designer. This will give you the list of your forms that you currently have in REDCap. Click on the form and it will go into the Online Designer itself. In my project setup, for instance, here I have my Design Your Collection Data Instruments and Enable Your Surveys. I hit Go to Online Designer. Here's that REDCap shared library, by the way, for the interested party over there. Or upload a data dictionary. Go to Online Designer, I'll have this list of all my forms. So let's say I want to go to demographics, hit demographics, and here's a list of all my variables in this particular form. I can then start adding, shaving, editing, whatever I want to do in this thing. So let's say I want to create a middle name. I want to create a middle name between first name and last name. How I would do that is by hitting Add Field, and then it would open up a wizard. Very quickly, the icons on top of each variable, it's Edit, this is Copy, this is branching logic, more about that later. You can move it with this, so I can say move it to the left and to the right. And anybody want to venture what the big red X means? Yay! And it also always basically shows you the variable name itself. So when I want to add a field, I click on Add Field, and it will give me this wizard. More about the wizard in a bit. So creating fields, once you're in the wizard, which is the same thing like this, you'll have a couple of things you need to fill out. The first thing you always start with is the field type. A field type is what type of question you want to ask. These are the field types. Field types start with, can be as easy as a text box to as complicated as a 40 variable drop-down menu. Up to you. Text box is like it says, just for instance this one, just a very short text box where you can put in some numbers. You can assign some validation to each text box, which is really handy if you, for instance, want to capture phone numbers or emails or specific dates. How to do that, I'll show you in a little bit. Radio buttons look like this, just a multiple choice question where you can only select one answer. Drop-down menus are exactly the same, only they create a drop-down menu instead of a radio button, so it saves a little bit of space in your form. Checkboxes look like this. They're exactly the same as radio buttons, with the main difference that you can select multiple options instead of just a single one. A note box is a text box on steroids without the validation option attached to it, which is really useful if you want, for instance, please comment, have any other comments you want to put in this form, or paste and copy your medical history in here, stuff like that. The file upload will actually allow users, survey participants or users in REDCap to upload a specific file. So let's say you have a picture of somebody's skin blemish for some reason. You can upload it here in any format you want. There's a limit to that, 8 megabytes, so no uploading MRIs, which are usually a couple of gigabytes, so fairly big. Then we have a slider visual analog scale, which is just a slider from 0 to 100, saying like you agree, disagree with that. It isn't shown in this example. And we have a couple of pre-baked radio buttons, yes and no, true or false. Yes is 1, no is 0, true is 1, false is 0, standard naming conventions. And finally we also have calculated fields. Calculated fields are really useful if you, for instance, during your data entry need to calculate some kind of value. BMI, for instance, or cholesterol. Cholesterol is one I usually use as an example. You have to have LDL, HDL, and triglycerides and throw them into a formula to calculate the total cholesterol of a person. You can do that with a calculated field. However, I don't advise using calculated fields unless you absolutely need it for your data entry. For instance, if you want to calculate total cholesterol but you don't use it for your data entry, do it afterwards during your statistical analysis. It's quicker, it's faster, and it also has the added benefit of not screwing up your form. Because if you import new data into a REDCap project and you have calculated fields defined, calculated fields won't populate because they will only execute when you're in a specific record and going through that form. So for the total cholesterol, for instance, you would have to be in record 1, form 1, where these questions are, go through it, hit save before it actually will calculate. You cannot import it from another system. And I mentioned field types because it kind of governs what you can do with the wizard to begin with. Once you select the field type, the wizard will actually change based on the field type. So if you have a section header, it will only show you a field label because that's the only thing that's relevant for a section header. If you have, for instance, a text box, it will show you only this, like field label and these options. If you have a multiple choice field type like checkboxes or radio buttons, it will actually show you a secondary field where you can add all the options in, which is kind of handy if you want to define a checkbox field. You have somewhere to define the options. So it changes a little bit based on what field type you're selecting. So go over it real quickly. You have your field label, which is the question people will see that are filling out the form or the survey. It can be anything like what's your age to a picture or whatever. You can use HTML in this to customize a little bit, to center it, to make it bigger, different font, whatever you want. After that, which is also important, is the variable name. A variable name is all lowercase, no spaces allowed, so an underscore usually, which is usually defined by your statistician. If you've never done this before and you have a fairly complex project, it might be good to talk to your statistician anyway, because he'll tell you, okay, you should collect age in this way, with this variable name and in this way, shape or form. So that's a thing. Also, variable names have to be unique across the project. So if you have age in form 1 and you have age in form 2, they cannot both be named age. There would be age in H1 or H1 and H2. Basically the exception to that rule is of course in longitudinal studies, where you can have where you can clone the different forms into different events. However, REDCap assigns a unique tag to it called the event name. So let's say you have follow-up visit 1, that's your event name, and you have follow-up visit 2, that's the second event name. If you both have age in each of these visits, it will reflect on the data export as follow-up visit 1/age, follow-up visit 2/age. So it's separate anyway, and that's also the way you refer to it in branching logic. But the main thing you should take away from this is that please have unique variable names. REDCap will actually not allow you to add the variable unless it's unique. Then we have validation. Validation is I mention it here specifically because it's a text box feature. Validation can be anything from, like I said, an email, US phone number, specific date format, only a whole number, a number with certain digits, etc. More about that later. We have a required fields, which you can use to make a question required in a survey. It's really handy, like I kind of want to know your email address, so I make this required. You cannot hit submit until you fill this out. Then we have the identifier, which is the way you flag if this specific variable is PHI. And you can do this for any field type, so that's kind of useful. We have our custom alignment. You can mess around a little bit on how the variable looks in a form. Is the text box underneath the field label or on the right? Do you have your list of checkbox options in a vertical way or in a horizontal way? Mess around with it. It's totally optional, but it's a cool little feature. You can streamline your forms with it. Then we had a question over the break over field notes. This is where you put a field note in. A field note is a small italic comment you put underneath a text box, for instance. For instance, if you have a validation for a specific date-time format, you know that, but the people entering that probably won't know that by just looking at the form. So what I usually do if I have a specific validation, I put what the validation is underneath in the field note. For instance, please use a valid email address or month, day, year, day, month, year, whatever you want to use. So let me demonstrate real quick how you add a quick variable. We're again in our demographics form. So, and I want to add middle name to this thing. I click on add a field, select the field type. Here's all the options I have available. Well, I want to add middle name, so that's a text box. If I, for instance, do checkbox, it disappears. You'll get choices here, and the validation thing disappears. But I want to do text box, so calling it middle name. REDCap has the ability to auto-name its variables if you have this checkbox enabled. You can see that it actually did middle name. It bases that off your field label. However, if you have a question like, please state your age for the record or something like that, it will actually start the variable name with please state, which is kind of weird. So at any point in time after the auto generation, you can turn it off if you want to, by the way. You want to edit the field name or the variable name, you can do that. I'm calling it 2, for instance. You can do that. Then the validation generates a drop-down menu with these options. We have quite a few of date-time options, as you can see. Email has to be an add email. Integer is a whole number, number can be decimals, phone number is US, here's some timestamps, and a US zip code. So we unfortunately don't have any phone numbers and zip codes other than the US. So you might want to figure something else out if you, for instance, want to have a Nigerian phone number. Now that I select a number, for instance, is a good example, you also get a minimum and a maximum. So, for instance, if it's an age question, you can say minimum age is 0 and the maximum age is 120. So this will actually tell REDCap that whatever number is entered in this text box has to be between 0 and 120. So if you put in 121, it will actually give you a pop-up saying like, this is not a valid in range, so to speak. This minimum and maximum will show up for all the dates and date times, but for emails, it's not really relevant. Same for a phone number or for a zip code. But for times, it kind of is relevant. Be careful if you do a time validation. It does have, the minimum and the maximum do have to be in the same format. If you don't want to have any validation, just hit no. Since this is a middle name, I want to hit no. So for field notes, how that looks, no initials. I hit save, and voila, I made a middle name over here with no initials in there. Really quick custom alignment. Let's say I want to have it left vertical, left horizontal. Now it appears on the, below that. Yeah, you can mess around a little with it a little bit. Up to you. Matrix fields. Matrix fields are basically checkboxes or radio button fields, but then a little bit condensed. We got a lot of questions saying, yeah, I have like a questionnaire with 19 how are you doing questions, but I have to put them underneath each other and it's really long. Can't we like condense it in some matrix shape? Now, they made this for that. It's quick and easy to set up. I'll demonstrate a little bit. It groups all your questions together. What you do have to realize is that all the options have to be the same. So you cannot say for the first 4 we have these 5 options, and for number 5 you have super extremely important. You will have to create a separate variable for that. You have to take it out of the matrix. So how you do that is easy. Matrix actually looks like this, for instance. I did this in the last training. If I want to kill that, I just kill it. I click on add a matrix of fields. I can give it a header. Let's call it training again. And then for each row will be a separate variable in my data export. I can create a field label and a variable name. So let's say food. I usually use food. There you go. So I have my name, Kathy. Add another row, creates another row, obviously. My wife's name, my dad's name, and my mom's name. So I have these questions. Then I need to define the options for it. So let's call this food, by the way. For each question, I need to define a label and a raw value. The label is the actual option people get to see. So for instance, pizza or green, whatever you want to call it. And the raw value is the value you attach to it on which you're going to do your statistical analysis. So this is usually a number. It can be the exact same thing as the label, if that's your thing. But for calculations, it's really easy to put a number in it. REDCap will actually automatically assign a number to it if you don't do it. For instance, if I do my pizza food groups, pizza, fries, hot dogs, what else? Let's say green beans. very good. So now I only attach labels. There's one choice per line, obviously. If I click anywhere else in this field, REDCap will actually give me a pop-up saying I attach values to it for you. So in this case, it's just sequentially 1, 2, 3, 4. If I then want to add something, say like 5 tofu, click anywhere else, because I defined it properly, it doesn't give me that pop-up. You split up the raw value and the label with a comma, easy as that. So 5, tofu. I can, for instance, also do this. Instead of 3, I want to do it, call it HD. That's also allowed. However, be careful where you put commas, because if you put a comma in there, REDCap will think it's the separator. So, yeah, second commas are fine, but the first comma it will see as the separator. So hitting save like this. Oh, sorry, my bad. I need to have a group name for it. This is a data dictionary thing. It's called food. And I also have to define if it's a single answer, radio buttons, or multiple answer for checkboxes. Let's do checkboxes for now. I hit save, and this is my, there we go. This is my new matrix. So that's how that works. While you're in edit view or in preview view, you can basically put stuff in here to test out how it looks. For instance, today, there you go. So, for instance, my first name would be Bas. I don't have a middle name, so I can mess with this. So I can fill out stuff to see how it would look. The thing that doesn't work for this is calculated fields and branching logic. So you will have to do a test record to test those things out properly. Branching logic is a way for you to hide or show a field based on what people have entered in a form. So to take my example of a pregnant male again, if you say gender is male or female, you kind of want to hide the question, are you pregnant, if somebody selects male. Kind of doesn't make sense to have that question in there. Well, you do that through branching logic. It's based on logic, as the name implies. It's limited to a specific project, so you can use any variable in the entire project to base your branching logic on, but no variables in a different project. You have two options basically. You have a drag and drop feature, which is over here, and a syntax-based feature, which is over here. If you're, has anybody got any programming experience here whatsoever? Anybody know how to make formulas in Excel? Most people do that. Well, it's not as hard as coding, as programming, and it's roughly the same level of complexity as programming a formula in Excel. You just need to know the syntax. So I'm going to start out with a drag and drop field and show you how the advanced step works. So let's say I do have my gender over here. So here's my gender with my options male and female, and I have branching logic for has the subject given birth before. If this field has branching logic associated with it, it actually shows this through branching logic exists for this field. I want to remove that. I go to the little green arrow, which actually gives me the branching logic pop-up. And if there's branching logic associated with the field, it will always start in the advanced branching logic syntax, which looks like this. If I want to remove this, I just delete this stuff, hit save, and now it's not there anymore. So adding it again, well, there's no branching logic. It starts out in drag and drop builder. How the drag and drop builder works is first you have to basically select which form you're wanting all the variables from, because it generates a long list of all the variables with their options associated with it. So for demographic, well, 1-2 data has different variables than demographic, of course. For stuff that's a text box, for instance a study ID or a first name, it actually says define criteria, where you can select an operator like should look like this and then a value. But I was going for male female, so that's there it is, sex. It actually gives you the label with the value behind it if it's a multiple choice option. In this case, I want to only show this field when the option is female, which is 0. I drop it and drag it here, and you can see that it automatically updates the advanced syntax field too. I now define that this field will only show up when somebody selects the gender female. I can add more stuff to it, for instance if Gerda selected tofu. So now it will only show up when the gender is female and the option tofu, or number 5 for Gerda, was selected. I can also do an OR by clicking any. It basically says like if either of these options are selected or both, show this field. So that's how you do that quickly. Of course, in the syntax you can mess around with formulas and if and then statements, but more about that in the advanced class. Hitting save again creates my branching logic again. Then the data dictionary. I referenced it a couple of times. What it is, it's a comma-separated value file, meaning that you can run it in Excel, but also in the Mac Numbers program or in LibreOffice or any other spreadsheet program you have, because it's a standard, an open standard everybody can use. Data dictionaries contain metadata, which is IT speak for data about data, meaning that the data dictionary will define your project, so it has data about your data fields. As I said, defines the entire project. This is dangerous because I had somebody coming to me saying like, I wanted to add 2 variables to my 300 variable project, created a data dictionary with 2 variables in it and uploaded it. What it does then is it deletes all the previous 300 variables and just adds 2 new variables to it, which was bad for him. Luckily I had a backup. So if you want to add something to a data dictionary, you have to download the entire data dictionary and upload the entire data dictionary with all the variables in it. So that's a big pitfall right there. So double check and import that everything you did was correct if you want to use this for some reason. Back up your project beforehand by exporting the previous data dictionary and by doing a full export of all your data. If you have those 2 things, it's really easy to recreate any project or repopulate if you made a mistake. And use the syntax found in the FAQ page. In the FAQ page, there's a fairly extensive section on branching logic and also the data dictionary, how to properly do it. Or come to the advanced class and learn how to do this. Modules and customizations. Modules allow you to do a couple of things. You can set up auto numbering, which is really easy when you're not married to a study ID, which I like. So REDCap will actually assign a different study ID for you. Also a rule I forgot to mention in the variable creation process is that the first variable on the first form in any project has to be the study ID or the record ID. You can give it any name as long as it's a text box which can generate a unique number or data type. The reason for this is that REDCap uses that number or that study ID to reference all the other values to this record. So it says, okay, this age belongs to record ID number 2, for instance. So it always has to be on the first page of the first form. If you select auto numbering, it will actually, it will not show up in any data collection forms. It will just be hidden. And once you hit like add a new form or a new record, it will actually auto-populate for you, so you won't have to worry about it. So, and it does this in a sequential way. If you want to utilize the scheduling feature in REDCap, you can turn it on here. Same for randomization. Another big thing is the specific email fields. If you're planning on doing automated invitations, this is where you select which email field you're going to use as the basis of your invitations. So it will generate a list of all the text boxes with the validation type emails in it. So if you don't have that, please put that in there. otherwise you cannot select anything. And if you select that one and it's filled out and the automated invite runs, so to speak, it will go to that field to think, okay, for this record, where do I need to send an email to? That's what this field is for. Excuse me. Then some customization, a little bit more esoteric to a certain extent. You can order the records by a different field. Right now it's always ordered by the record ID. But if you, for instance, want to order it by MRN or date of birth, you can do that. You can also set a custom record label. Right now, if you look at all your records, you just see the record ID number, like 1 through study number infinity. If you, for instance, want people to find different sets of patients easier, what I, for instance, do is have the last name plus date of birth in there. You can combine the two, create a custom label for each record. Really useful. The data history widget is where you can track per variable in each record what happened to that variable. So if somebody made a change to that variable, update or something, you'll actually see a track log of that. By that, it's a little H next to each variable you can select on. Useful. It's automatically on if you want to turn it on, so you don't have to bother with it. The Display Today Now button is that button you saw when you have a text field with validation for date time format, so to speak. It will actually give you a little calendar function, or if you hit the Today Now button, it will actually populate that field with today's date or the time. Really useful if you don't want to type dates. If you're really paranoid about your coworkers, you can set up require a reason for editing existing records. So meaning that if they go back into a record for some reason and they update it, and they will have to type something like, why are you changing this? So really useful. And finally, the data resolution workflow and field comments, which is a recent addition to the feature list. This will allow you to create a workflow on specific variables and specific records. So let's say you have a question about a variable. You don't know if this age is correct or the date of birth is correct. And you want to ask a question about that. Right now, before this, you actually have to make a note of it on paper or somewhere else, email your PI, like how are we going to handle this? What you can do with this is you can actually open up an issue specific to that variable and that record, saying like, I'm not sure about this because this person is from the dark heart of Africa and we don't have any proper records regarding date of birth. And you can then assign it to, for instance, your PI, like what do you want to do with this? The PI then gets an email or can see a list of all the issues open and basically fix them or close them or resolve them. It's a little feature they stole from clinical trial management systems, and if your study is big enough to utilize this, please utilize it. It's a really useful feature. Then the user rights. User rights are really powerful. If you give somebody the right to edit user rights in your project, you're basically giving them the keys to the castle, because they can give themselves different user rights. So you basically open them up for everybody. You can fine-tune these rights really specifically, saying, for instance, on the top right, this is a list of all the forms in your project at this point in time. You can say, like, well, you cannot see the demographics, you can only read the first 5, and you can only add or edit data to the last 4. Up to you, or any combination of these. You can check these boxes to give people different abilities in REDCap. For instance, if you don't want them to export any data, just click on no access and they don't even have the data export tool available to them. They cannot create PDFs, they cannot create Excel spreadsheets, etc. If that's a little bit too rigid for you, and you say, well, okay, you can export stuff, but not the identifier, so then you just select the de-identifier option, and they can only export de-identified information, provided that you tag the proper variables with the identifier option, of course. So yeah, these are the the rights. This list will change a little bit based on which features you activated, yes or no. For instance, there's no randomization in there, but if randomization is active, you'll get user rights for randomization in there. Another one which is important, like, is the user rights over here. I just mentioned that, and the database setup design, which will actually allow people to mess with your project, the settings, such and so forth. Locking is the feature which you can use to give somebody the rights to lock up a record, so it cannot be edited by anybody others who doesn't have locking rights, so to speak. Then we have this one that's fairly important, the create records, the renaming of records, and the deletion of records. Everybody automatically has the ability to create records. However, the renaming and deletion of records is a little bit sensitive in terms of data management. So people don't have that. If you have to delete a record, what I would advise is go into user rights, give yourself the rights to delete records, go to the things you need to delete them, and then remove the ability to delete records from your own user profile. That's the safest way to safeguard against inadvertent deletions. Also, really useful, who here uses medical students to do data entry? Yeah. Students, by definition, are usually have an expiration date. So REDCap also allows you to set up an expiration date for any user right you assign, which is really useful because most people, after 3 months of having somebody working on their project, forget to delete them from their project, and they would still have access over time. So if you do that during the setup, you'll actually have, you can say, expiration date January 1st, and you don't have to think about it anymore. January 1st, this person will be removed from your user rights in your project. If they're still with your project after the fact, they will knock on your door saying, like, I don't have access to your project anymore, and you will have to re-add them at that point in time. We also have data access groups. Data access groups are really useful if you have multiple sites, for instance, different hospitals in different countries or different states, or if you want to do double data entry. Data access groups allows you to put users in specific groups, for instance, a Seattle group and a DC group. People in the Seattle group can only see the records entered by people in the Seattle group, so themselves or other people. They cannot see the records entered in the DC group, which is really useful. So you can split them apart. For double data entry, this is really useful. You just call them group A and group B, and you're done. However, if you're going to do double data entry that way, come up with a clever naming scheme for your record IDs, calling them, for instance, 1A and 1B. Otherwise, you'll have a really hard time matching them up. Yeah, let's just show this, how this works. So I can get to my user rights through the left-hand side window called user rights, or I can go through it through the project setup. Where's my user rights? There it is, user rights. What we recently added is the ability to create user roles. User roles is really easy. You set up all the permissions, so to speak, beforehand, and then you just add persons to that role or remove them from that role, which is really handy if you have to, for instance, to add 10 people. You only set up the rights once, and you don't have to click through all the things again. For instance, if I want to add a colleague of mine to this, Sally, I just type in Sally and I get actually a list of all the people that have name Sally in their username or in their first and last name. But this is the Sally I want. I click assign to a role, data entry, and it actually gives me the correct thing. So right now I've assigned Sally to this data entry role. Behind this group of people that have access to this project at this point in time, you actually see a bunch of X's and check marks. That's actually a quick overview of all the user rights that are assigned to them. So you can see for the, let's say, the user rights, only 2 people have access to edit the user rights. That would be Tony Black, my boss, and myself. If I want to remove them, I just click on them, click remove from role, and then they've been removed. They still have the same user rights, and it actually gives you a pop-up. So you click on edit user privileges and then you can remove them from the fact. There you go. Now that person is gone again. So let's say I want to edit a complete new user. Again, I'll go for Sally. I add them with custom user rights and I get this field. Kind of looks the same like we just saw on the screenshot, but a little bit different. Expiration days on top, for instance. I have my randomization thing set up. As a result, it shows up in my user rights. I have my data resolution workflow set up. As a result, it shows up in the user rights. So if you have a very simple project with not a lot of stuff enabled, this will be shorter, so to speak. Here's that data entry rights for specific forms. I can do read only, and she can't read that, and she can only do this. And also a new user notification. If you don't want to spam people and just tell them like you have access, you can uncheck that, and REDCap will send them an email. Click add user, and this user has been added. It's that easy. Data access groups, you also set it up here. It's on this separate tab over here on the top. And it will actually show you this screen. I already set up a couple of groups, Amsterdam, DC, LA, and Seattle. I assigned a couple of people to, I haven't assigned them yet, myself and Sally. If you're not assigned to a group, you can see everything. So that's really useful if you're, for instance, the project coordinator and you're governing 5 different sites. It's kind of handy that you get to see all the records. So if you're not part of a group, you get to see everything. How do I add somebody to a group? Just select the user in the drop down. Let's say Sally to Amsterdam. Now let's do DC. DC doesn't have anybody. I click assign, and now Sally has been assigned to the DC data access group. That easy. Pre-production is basically you designed your data collection instruments, you set up your surveys, you are ready to go, so to speak. That's what this is. You've tested everything, you've signed user rights, and you're ready to move your project to production. These check marks you see on the left-hand side, you also see them in the project setup. Don't do anything. It's just a toggle switch you can turn on for yourself, saying, okay, I'm done with this phase, and I have to move to the next one. So you can move to production without having to have the check marks on this, so don't worry about it. Moving a project into production. At the bottom, there's a big button called Move the Project into Production. If you click on this, you'll get this pop-up. The important thing about this is this little checkbox with delete all data, calendar events, and uploaded documents. REDCap assumes that if you're moving from development to production, all the data in your development stage was test data or dummy data. So you get the option to clear the slate, so to speak, clean the slate, and start with a totally empty project. All your forms will be intact, all your users will be intact, but all the records will be removed. If you don't want to do this, because you already start collecting data for some reason, just uncheck this, and nothing will be deleted. If you do check this, I get a pop-up saying, okay, somebody wants to move to production. I click on it. I always check this to see if you don't have real data in your study. And if I'm not sure if you have real data in your study because it kind of looks real, I will send you an email saying, are you sure about this? So that's, again, one of those safeguards I'm talking about. Some practical notes. Be ready to enroll people, to actually collect data. So I can't stress this enough. I had numerous instances of people that finished their development and said, well, I'm ready to go, and then they didn't have RB, or their start date was 2 months from now. And then after 2 weeks, after they moved to production, they came to the realization that their PI wanted them to add another form and basically turn the whole project upside down. It happens. So only move to production when you're really sure you want to start collecting data soon. Otherwise, you have to go through that whole approval process, and especially if you're still developing stuff, it's kind of a hassle and not necessary. If you did this inadvertently, I have the ability to put it back into development, so just shoot me an email, I'll do that for you. Making changes in production. Mentioned it before, this is a slide that actually details all these steps, which I'll skip over because we're short on time. Yeah, enter draft mode, select the form you want to modify, make changes, review the changes, and submit them for approval. The potentials for data loss, which I check for always, are these. These are the major ones. There's a couple of smaller ones which I also check for, but these are the major ones. So basically, don't do this, otherwise you'll get an email from me. Data entry. Now that you're in production, it's kind of useful to know how to actually enter data, because that's what it's all about to begin with. There's 3 different ways of doing that. If you're in a classical form, basically a classical project, you just get a list of forms, kind of like this on the bottom here. It's fairly straightforward, and it has a soft requirement, meaning that if a field is required and you don't fill it out and you want to save your form, you'll get a pop-up saying like, oh, you didn't fill out this required field. However, you have the option to say, I know I'm ignoring it, and just go ahead. That's a soft requirement. In survey mode, which is just a link to a single form for most people, there's a hard requirement, meaning that if a field is required, they can only hit submit once this field is actually filled out properly. So that's the main difference between soft and hard. Then we also have longitudinal ways of entering data. It's a little bit different than just a list, because you get a grid based on your events and the forms in those events with different status symbols. If it's a green little blob, it means it's completed. Red means that it's incomplete, and yellow means that it's unverified. These form status thingies can actually are totally optional, so you don't have to use them. You can have them all in red. At the bottom of each form, you'll see a little drop-down menu with incomplete, complete, and unverified. Selecting one of these changes the color on the form. Then the data entry dashboard. I like this one a lot, because if you do use these status symbols, so to speak, you get a quick overview of all your records and the various stages they're in. Top one here is a good example. For instance, these the rows are studies, study records, so participant 1, 2, and 3 in this case, and I can see that, oh, for 1, demographics was filled in, for 2, only baseline, and yeah, for 3, month 2 data was unverified, or probably filled in. Clicking on any of these little dots will actually take you directly to the form in the specific record, so it's also a quick way to navigate through all your study data. For longitudinal forms, this is similar. However, it gets super long, because it basically has a column for each form in each event. If you have 10 events with 5 forms each, you get 50 columns. So it gets long quite quickly. So mess around with it if you want. For surveys, there's a little bit of a different thing. You just probably get 2, if you have a single survey, a 2-column thing, participant ID and the form completion status. You have a green check mark if the survey was completed and actually allowed. There's also an orange check mark. When you enable the save and return feature, people can partially fill out surveys and come back later. However, I don't recommend it, because you get incomplete data that way, because people forget. These two can be mixed. So let's say you have your baseline data is your survey, and it's filled out. You get the green check marks here in your record status dashboard. Quickly show you how that looks. So record status dashboard is always findable here. Hit that, and it kind of looks like this. Since I don't have that many events, it's not super long, but it can get long quite quickly. So just clicking, for instance, in on Jane Doe, number 2. So I haven't entered anything in it, but I did have that little status symbol, which is this thing. So if I now put it back to incomplete because it's empty, I hit save. This is the longitudinal grid for this patient. If I go back to record status dashboard, I can see that for Jane Doe, number 2 is now red again. So you can switch these things around at your leisure. Well, this is it. Learning how to use REDCap. You already did the intro just now. Congratulations. If you want to retake the intro, if other people want to take the intro, go to the class schedule up here. I do one once a month, usually the first Tuesday of each month. The advanced classes, I should fix this. The next one is next week, also on Tuesday, and it covers longitudinal studies and surveys in a more detailed format. Go extensively over how to set up a longitudinal study, how to set up a survey, how to do the automated invites properly, etc. If you don't have time to do that, I understand. You can do the online videos and help like I said, and the ongoing help is below here. Thank you for coming.